Hi, namaste, and thank you for tuning in. I first and foremost want to apologize for the long lapse in time since my last video, and even more so for my long lapse of silence regarding the actual reason I left the cult of Nityananda last August. I'd like to give a little bit of background information as to what prompted me to leave that organization, why I now call it a cult, why I'm so sorry for all the years I spent promoting that place, thinking it was good, why I've come to the conclusion now that it's actually not. So first and foremost, last year in August, I was sent to Toronto on what was kind of a secret mission within that organization. I was meant to try to get political asylum for the guru who calls himself Nityananda in Canada. And at that time, simultaneously, two of the children from the Nityananda Gurukul, the residential school based in his ashram outside of Bangalore, South India, were also in Toronto, trying to basically drum up public support through power manifestation. Basically, what these kids would do is sit on a throne, chant a mantra to connect themselves to that guru, and then proceed to express what most people think of as miraculous powers, reading through the third eye while blindfolded, scanning somebody's body for illnesses, looking into the distance and doing a remote viewing, or giving people answers to the most profound as well as the most personal questions in life by reading the Akashic records. One night while we were all there together, and I want to make it clear, I was a Gurukul Acharya at the time. I was one of the people who taught a class on a regular basis to the kids. That's why they had a personal relationship with me. I was one of the few people in the organization who had approval from the power structure, the authorities, meaning Nityananda himself, Ranjita, who is known there as Ma Nityananda Mayi Swami, as well as Madvait and Rishi Advait, who ran the Gurukul. I was one of the few people who had approval to talk to all of the kids. And I taught them social media, so how to use Facebook, how to use YouTube, how to use Instagram. So the kids were already comfortable with me because of the amount of time I had spent with them in India. And one night, while I was there, the two children, a 13-year-old girl, a boy about that same age, they came downstairs to where I was staying and started to cry really, they had an emotional breakdown. And the little girl told me that the Akashic record readings she was doing was not real, that she wasn't seeing golden letters and reading people's cosmic answers to their questions. She was actually just making things up. And that the blindfold reading they were doing was also fake, and that they couldn't really body scan, they couldn't really do remote vision. And it was like what I thought was my purpose in life, what I had based so much of my own belief in, was shattering. Because for those of us who were members of that organization, as some of you might remember from my previous videos, the foundation of our belief was that these superpowers were called Shaktis, that they were spiritual powers awakened through the initiation by that guru, and that these kids were basically representatives of him. People made profound life choices based on the answers given to them by these children. And I mean choices like giving up their families to become monastic members of the order, giving all of their money as a donation to the organization, signing up for programs that cost tens of thousands of dollars because kids told them in Akashic reading that they had to. So when she told me that they were faking these powers, at first I found it hard to believe. I was experiencing something that cult psychologists refer to as cognitive dissonance. And that's when we're given a piece of information so contradictory to the worldview we've been brainwashed to believe that we can't even process it. We feel like it is impossible to believe. But because this was a girl who I trusted, a girl who I knew very well, whose parents I had spent a lot of time with, I listened and I asked her, why did you fake these powers? And she cried even harder, and she said that in their school, kids were subjected to starvation, sleep deprivation. They weren't even allowed to get up to go to the bathroom unless they expressed these powers. And she said that the worst thing that happened, and the reason why she was crying to me, she said she was afraid to go back to Bengaluru Adinam, outside of Bidadi, South India, because she didn't want to get beaten again. And this was when, my life was already unraveling by listening to this child, but when she said that they had been beaten, it was more than I could handle. So I asked her to explain what happened. And she said that on the morning of December 31st, 2017, the Gurukul head stormed into the children's dorm first thing in the morning before the girls were awake with a stick and made one of the children, one of the young girls, beat every other girl there until they either bled or cried tears. They couldn't just cry, they had to have actual tears so that she knew it wasn't a fake cry. And that some of the kids had black eyes, some of the kids had welts visible on their skin, bruises. They were battered. And I asked the girl who beat them, I asked the girl telling me this, the girl who beat you, how did she feel? And she said it was harder on her than on everybody else. She was crying while being forced to beat her friends. And after this beating, the kids weren't allowed to leave their dormitory for days afterwards. They were locked inside basically a steel cage within the ladies' dorm, hidden from everybody else. See, I want to make it clear. The rest of the ashramites, as we called them, Adinavasis, we did not know that this abuse had taken place because the kids were locked in their dorm and none of us saw them. At the time, there was a program going on called Mahasadashivoham. And so most of us were busy all day, every day in the program hall. And, the kids used to be a part of that program. Every day they would sit with participants to try to help them awaken their third eyes and manifest powers. The reason they were beaten, the little girl told me that the teacher, while the kids were getting brutally attacked, forced to attack each other, the teacher told them they are being punished because participants are not manifesting these powers, and that it's the children's responsibility to make the people express those powers through entanglement. The boy who was there in Toronto, I asked him at that point, did you know that this had happened in the girls' dorm? Because in that campus, boys and girls were strictly forbidden from speaking to each other. So I was wondering, if she was making this up, he would maybe not even know. But I wanted to know what he knew. And he said, Ma, not only is what she telling you the truth, but the same thing happened in the boys' dorm also. That one of the 17-year-old boys was forced to beat all the other boys. And he said that boy who had to beat the younger kids just collapsed in tears afterwards, because here was a big 17-year-old forced to assault children half his age and younger. It's horrific to think about. And that was when I had the realization that no matter how good I felt from Swamiji Nityananda's meditations, no matter how charismatically he speaks, no matter how much I love Hinduism, and I still love and honor and revere Sanatana Dharma, I still believe purely practiced Dharma is the ultimate path in life. But I realized in that moment, an organization that claims to be nonviolent, but that condones the beating of children, does not deserve to be venerated and respected. And that's when I realized I did not want to mislead any more people and recruit for that cult anymore. So at the end of August of last year, I dropped the kabi, meaning I stopped wearing the orange robes of a Hindu renunciant, and quietly came back to my regular life in Canada. And a lot of people were criticizing me at that point in time. A lot of Nityananda's critics were criticizing me, saying, why did you just leave? You must have some insider information. There must be more to it than that. But I was still brainwashed enough, and I can't stress enough that this organization brainwashes people. I was still brainwashed enough that I believed that even though the kids had been beaten, maybe the fault or the responsibility is in the teachers. I desperately wanted to report the attack to the police, but I was prevented from doing so by a lady who was the Mahant of Europe, who also happened to be there in Toronto at the time. She told me, don't call the police, report this internally to Nityananda. So I sent him a message via his main secretary, his right-hand person, Ranjita, who denied the incident happened, and nothing was done about it. Since then, I've done my own internal investigations. I've had so many people come to me who have witnessed this kind of abuse, whose children have told them about it, including a very brave woman named Vinuta Shankar from Bangalore, who has exposed all of this on her Facebook page, describing in detail the sad experiences her own son lived in that organization. He was a full-time student in the Gurukul. He lived there, and he begged his parents to take him home. And when they did, he told them all of this and much more. But because of the brainwashing, I wasn't able to process the horrors of this cult in such a way that put accountability on the leader. And this is something that Leah Remini described beautifully in her A&E series Exposing Scientology, that a lot of Scientologists who suffer because of the way the administrators of that organization treat them, they still think L. Ron Hubbard was a spiritual genius and that he had given them something great. So I was going through that process of knowing that the kids had been abused, but still thinking Swamiji's teachings are great. And it took me a full year of deprogramming myself before I finally had the strength and the courage to speak up about all of this and understand without any question or any doubt that as a self-proclaimed micromanager of his organization, no decision is made in that cult without Nityananda's direct personal approval or instruction. Nobody breathes without him telling them they have to. And I'm not even saying that's as a tongue-in-cheek thing. He would literally tell people, stop breathing, start breathing in some of our internal meetings. So a micromanager who decides who we're allowed to be friends with, who we're allowed to listen to, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, when we wake up, when we go to sleep, what we eat, what we don't eat. There's no way the teachers in the Gurukul school would brutalize the kids without him knowing about it. And that's when I realized he is a dangerous cult leader. I started privately reaching out to parents who had kids in that school and telling them what I knew and requesting that they please take this seriously, talk to their children, help get their kids out, and planning what more I should do. And in that process, found out much, much more of the abuse beyond just what was happening to the kids, that was happening to other people. And that's when I realized really I had to take this to the public. And I mean, people have lost their life savings to attend programs because they were promised that after making a payment, the money would just reappear in their bank accounts. And because of the brainwashing, I was one of the people who promoted that silly, stupid idea. And I want to really apologize to all of you who have watched my videos who have maybe made that mistake yourselves because I encouraged you to. And I want you to know now that not only I'm sorry, but you're not the only one. So many people were abused by that organization to the effect that Nityananda himself and the cult he runs was actually charged with racketeering. And this is something that none of us in the organization knew about because he told us all the court cases ever filed against him, he successfully won. And we didn't do our research because we believed he was Mahasadashiva in form, which I now know he is not. He's a human being, a flawed human being, one who I would even say fits all the character profiling of a narcissistic sociopath. And so we took anything he said as the ultimate truth. We didn't look beyond what he said. And a lot of you have pointed out in the comments under my videos that I seemed brainwashed at the time. And you're right, I was. But I'm not anymore. And, you know, I've even put a list of things I want to mention in this video. That's why I keep touching my laptop so it doesn't turn off. I want to make sure I cover every point here. So bear with me if I don't sound as fluid and happy and as I used to, but like this is serious stuff now. So some of the people who are trying to defend the Gurukul, since I brought this public on my Facebook page before making this video, have said the yogic lifestyle is a tough one. It requires a level of physical commitment that's not comfortable for everyone, and so you're exaggerating what happened to the kids. I want to make it clear. What happened to the kids was not tapas. It wasn't a yogic method to reach a higher consciousness. When I say they were starved, I mean that for 4 days and 4 nights straight, they weren't allowed to leave a hall where they were sitting on a solid stone floor without food, without water, without going to bed. Some of them peeing and pooping in their pants because they weren't allowed to get up and go to the bathroom until they manifested these so-called powers. That is starvation, that is sleep deprivation. There were kids instructed to pour water on any child who fell asleep. That is what I mean when I say sleep deprivation. It wasn't a yogic lifestyle that they had signed up for. It was abuse that if their parents had known was going to be done going in, I would like to hope that their parents wouldn't have put them in that kind of an environment. Next thing is that since coming out with this information publicly, I have been the target of a major systematic character assassination by that cult organization. They have accused me of poisoning Nityananda, which is absolutely absurd. I have not and never would poison anybody. They've accused me of being the one who sleep deprived people there, which again is absurd because nobody has authority in that organization except for Nityananda himself. If anybody else in that cult tells somebody, stay awake, don't go to sleep, it's because he has told them to. If anybody wakes people up early in the morning, it is because Nityananda has instructed them to. He never takes responsibility or personal accountability for the crimes he commits. It's always blamed on somebody else. And I can see, even legally speaking, the reason kids were forced to beat each other is to avoid legal accountability on behalf of the adults, which I really believe Children's Protective Services will not take that as an excuse. If an adult gives a child a stick and says, beat this other kid, that is the adult instigating and condoning and provoking that violence. When I asked the 2 kids if they had told their parents that this had happened to them, they told me that their teachers told them it would be Guru Droha, which means a crime against the spiritual teacher, to reveal it to their parents. And in that cult, people fear Guru Droha above all else because we're told Lord Shiva can save you if you have committed murder or if you have stolen, or if you have lied, or if you have cheated. But even Shiva himself can't save you if you've committed Guru Droha. And so one of the fear tactics that they implement to prevent people from speaking out about this kind of atrocity is the fear-mongering that if you speak out, it's Guru Droha. And this is the same thing that abusers do to kids all over the world. This is exactly the same tactic used by a child rapist who says, if you tell somebody, you'll get in trouble. And it's really horrifying that something like this would happen in a spiritual organization that publicly proclaims it takes care of kids and that it's nonviolent and that it's a safe space. It's the exact opposite of what it promotes itself to be. Now, when I started doing research into cults, I really didn't believe that this cult is as dangerous as other cults, because the really dangerous cults sometimes take up suicide pacts. If you hear about the suicide pact in Jonestown, where people were forced to drink poison, or the people who followed Hale-Bopp Comet and they all committed suicide in their Adidas shoes. Some of you might remember these news stories. Or in Waco, Texas, where the Branch Davidians had like a gunfight with local authorities and their house burned down and they all died. I used to think those cults are the extreme danger cults, but the Nityananda cult is different because it's Hindu and it doesn't believe in violence and it doesn't promote suicide. But very frighteningly, Nityananda has now made his disciples take an oath that they are willing to fight a war and die for him in order to protect him and his teachings. So that means my worst fears about this cult are starting to come true. He is telling people dying for him will bring them glory and that it's not a bad thing. And we all know that death, suicide, murder, those are the worst things. So if you have a friend or a loved one who is trapped in that cult, this is the worst case scenario starting to play out. And it's time that we bring everyone back to their sanity. When people in that cult are now accusing me of, the accusations are just, they would be ridiculous and laughable if they weren't sad and frightening. They're accusing me of being a Catholic implant paid by the Vatican who is a member of Opus Dei. Some of you might know Opus Dei from the Da Vinci Code. It's the extremist Catholic sect that promotes self-flagellation and suffering, which I do not believe in those things at all. I still call myself Hindu. I still pray for the highest good in a Hindu way. This kind of character assassination is just showing the level to which they're willing to sink to try to silence the people speaking out against them. They've also accused some of my best friends of having a drug smuggling ring, which they later denied. Anyhow, I'm not telling you believe me because I'm telling you this or anything like that. What I'm saying is doing our own research and coming to our own conclusions is a basic human right. That's the free will that we have as human beings. And when somebody tells us that it's a crime to look up information that contradicts their agenda, that's when we have to start questioning what exactly their agenda is. And I can't stress enough how eye-opening it's been for me when I started to research cults and charismatic cult leaders and the dangers of following cults. I'll put some links in the video description about this, and I'll also put links to the court cases Nityananda has lost. And it's especially important now that I would like to formally apologize to Arti Rao, Vinay Bharadwaj, Lenin Karupan, and Douglas McKellar, who I used to slander in my own videos, because I was told that these four people were anti-Hindu elements. Arti Rao is the one who bravely went public with the rape the multiple rapes to which she was subjected by Nityananda. She has filed charges against him for rape, and to evade those charges, to avoid, like, he is literally running away from the court date and fled India. Vinay Bharadwaj also charged Nityananda with rape, and in return, he was accused of rape just to sully his name and prevent him from speaking out. His story is also all over the media, but we were not allowed as Nityananda disciples to read his side of the story. Lennon Karupan was a whistleblower, Douglas McCallum as well. And I always believed that these people were, quote, anti-Hindu elements, because that's what Nityananda told us they were. Now he's telling people that I'm an anti-Hindu element, and I know that I'm telling the truth. And if I'm telling the truth and he's calling me this, then the people he called that in the past, from my own personal anecdotal evidence, they must also be telling the truth. And that's why I started really studying their cases. And I encourage you to do the same if you feel at all like there's a gray area here. The other thing I'd like to apologize for is in the past, when people have commented on my videos back when I was still brainwashed by that cult, I used to censor my comments. And if people commented that they had attended Inner Awakening or Sadashivoham or Nityanandoham or Mahasadashivoham, if they commented and said I didn't develop any powers, or that they hadn't felt anything special, or that they felt ripped off, or that they couldn't earn their money back, I used to delete those comments. And I am very sorry about that now. At the time, I believed I was protecting Dharma. I believed I was protecting the good that Swamiji Nityananda was bringing into the world. He doesn't deserve to be called Swamiji. I'm sorry to the actual Swamis in India who live as Swamis. He doesn't deserve that honorific title. I believed I was defending him by silencing his critics. And I would like to now extend an offer. Anybody who feels like you haven't had the right to speak out, or like you are, upset about what you experienced there, you are more than welcome to comment here, and I will not delete any of your comments. And I'll also include a link in the video description if you have been abused, either in the Nityananda Gurukul, by Nityananda himself, by the organization, in whatever way you might have been abused. You don't need to be afraid to come forward. And I'm not saying tell your story here in my comment section or call me. There is a phone number and email address that I found on the Cult Watch Nityananda blog, that it's an anonymous contact that you can reach out to for legal support. And I highly encourage everyone not to let this bully win. I know a lot of people personally who have suffered unspeakable abuse in that place by that man. And they're scared to come forward because they have been told that if they come forward, they will be accused of rape. They will be accused of violence, that they will have a lawsuit slapped on them that they can't afford to fight. And I personally believe the truth always wins. If there's a war between truth and lie, truth will win. And so if you are one of those victims who's afraid to come forward, please don't let their lie, their threat, stop you from doing what's right. So with that, I'll say thank you for tuning in. Sorry that this video wasn't more fun and light and airy and exciting like some of my other videos have been, but for once I really feel like this is what needed to be said. And I thank you for your time, and I thank you for listening. Until next time, namaste.